If this story touched something deep inside you, don't let it end here. Tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Whether it's a quiet night in Texas or a rainy morning in Manila, your presence matters. Drop a comment below. Let's build a global circle of listeners. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow, we're sharing a brand new story. One that just might change how you see love, loss, or hope. Don't miss it. Stay with us. This journey is only getting started. It was supposed to be just one night. One quick favor. Madison Rivers, 23 years old, had been cramming for midterms in her tiny Portland apartment when her phone buzzed. It was her roommate, Cara, calling from the campus clinic with a voice hoarse from a fever. "Please," she whispered, "can you cover my shift at the hotel front desk? Just tonight." Madison hesitated, staring at her open textbooks. But she owed Cara big time. And besides, the hotel was only 10 minutes away. By 7 p.m., Madison was behind the front desk at the Rainhaven Inn, a small boutique hotel tucked between two downtown shops and an old bookstore. The reservation software was ancient, the lighting flickered, and the entire place smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Rain tapped gently against the front windows, and the lobby was quiet, save for the ticking of a brass wall clock. Then the front door chimed. Madison looked up startled. A tall man stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and his shoulders were slightly hunched, like the storm outside had somehow made its way into his bones. He paused just inside the entrance, blinking, as though adjusting to the warmth. Something about him, not his looks, but his stillness, made her chest tighten. "Good evening," she offered, doing her best to sound confident. "Do you have a reservation?" The man hesitated. His voice was low, gravelly, as if unused for days. I think I called earlier. The name's Nathan Cole," she typed quickly, her fingers dancing across the outdated keys. "Nathan Cole, room 204, one night, king bed, late checkout." She handed him a plastic key card. Their fingers brushed for the briefest second, but he didn't flinch. He didn't smile either, just gave a quiet "thank you," then turned toward the elevator. But halfway there, he stopped. Madison watched as he stood motionless, back turned, for nearly 5 seconds. Then he glanced over his shoulder, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met again. His were dark, not angry, not afraid, just empty. Then he stepped into the elevator and was gone. She sat back down behind the desk, heart strangely unsettled. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Sadness? No. Deeper than that. Like watching someone silently drown while standing on dry land. An hour passed. Through the window, she saw him again, sitting outside on the small garden bench beneath. The pouring rain, no umbrella, no motion, no reason, just stillness. As if he wasn't trying to get dry. As if he was trying to feel something. Anything. She didn't know his story. She didn't know his name beyond what the screen had told her. But something in her gut whispered. He wasn't here for a night's rest. He was here for something else, or maybe for the end of everything. And that's when she tore a small piece of notepad paper and wrote 12 words that would change everything. The paper was small, torn from a notepad, barely enough space for a full sentence. But Madison didn't hesitate. Her pen moved before she could second-guess herself. She folded it once, then again, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't advice. Just 12 simple words. If you're still alive today, you're braver than you think. She didn't sign it, didn't leave a name, just crept up to room 204 as the clock struck 2 a.m., crouched and slid the note under the door. Then she turned and walked away. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no message, no sign he'd even read it. Cara, now recovered, said he had checked out before sunrise, early, quiet, didn't ask for a receipt. Madison didn't know how to feel. She had expected something, a look, a word, maybe even a thank you. But silence. Silence felt like a door slammed shut. Still, deep down, a part of her held on to hope that maybe, just maybe, those 12 words had done something. Weeks passed. Madison went back to juggling 2 part-time jobs, late-night homework, and overdue rent. She tried to push room 204 out of her mind, but it lingered, like the aftertaste of a dream you couldn't quite shake. Every now and then, when she walked past the hotel or saw rain clinging to the glass, she thought of him, the man with hollow eyes and the weight of 1,000 quiet regrets on his shoulders. Then, nearly 2 months later, an email arrived. Subject line: Employment opportunity, assistant to executive director. She almost deleted it. She hadn't applied for anything, probably spam, but her name was spelled perfectly, full name, middle initial, all of it. The sender, a health tech company she'd barely heard of, Theranova Group. She opened it, heart racing. A personal recommendation had been made on her behalf. They were inviting her to an in-person interview in downtown Seattle. The role was salaried. Benefits included. Entry-level, but high exposure. It didn't make sense. Madison called the number listed, expecting a robot or maybe an error, but a woman answered, cheerful and professional. Theranova HR, this is Rachel. May I ask who's calling? This is Madison Rivers, she said cautiously. I think I received this by mistake. There was a pause. Then the woman replied, Actually, Ms. Rivers, you were referred by someone who requested to remain anonymous, but I assure you, the recommendation was sincere. Would you be available this Friday at 10 a.m.? Madison agreed before her brain caught up. That Friday, she walked into a glass tower that made her second-hand heels feel painfully loud. She was led upstairs to a polished modern office, and there, standing behind a desk, back turned to the window, was Nathan Cole. Only, now he looked different, alive. Sharp suit, clean shave, steady eyes. He turned and smiled gently. Hello, Madison. She blinked. You? He nodded. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded, weathered slip of paper. Her note. He looked her in the eye. I read it, and I'm still here. Madison didn't take the job right away. She walked out of that sleek Theranova office with her heart hammering and her head spinning. The man she once thought might disappear forever now stood steady, alive, and offering her a seat at his table, and yet nothing about it felt like a fairy tale. When she returned the next morning, dressed in her best thrift store blazer, she didn't know what to expect. But Nathan, Mr. Cole, as the staff called him, was calm, composed, and surprisingly kind. He introduced her with quiet confidence, never once mentioning the past or the note. And Madison, she kept her head down, determined to earn her place, not just carry a memory. But over time, something shifted. Every day at 3 p.m, Nathan would appear with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. No words, just a soft smile, remembering that she didn't drink caffeine. When it rained, he was always waiting at the door with an umbrella, holding it gently above her without a word. And one afternoon, when he saw her nervously flipping through business jargon, he left a pack of flashcards on her desk labeled, Today's words, from your quiet supporter. They never talked about what had happened at the hotel. Never mentioned room 204 or the bench soaked in rain. But it lingered, unspoken, like music playing just below hearing. And yet, it wasn't all easy. There were moments she doubted herself, when colleagues whispered behind glass walls, when she fumbled through a presentation and her face burned red with shame. But every time Nathan was steady, never coddling, but always present. He'd glance at her after a long meeting and say just 3 words. "Thank you, brave one." At first, she thought it was just a callback to her note, a private little echo of something that once saved his life. But the way he said it, it felt real. It felt like he meant it every single time. And every time she heard it, Madison stood a little taller. One night, long after the office had emptied, they found themselves in the company's tiny employee library, helping reshelve a pile of books left in disarray. Nathan didn't delegate. He rolled up his sleeves, sorting biographies by spine color instead of author name, grinning like a guilty child when she corrected him. And that's when she saw it, the man behind the title. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, but someone who still knew what it felt like to be broken and to be held together by someone else's kindness. Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the same book. They didn't pull away. There was a silence, not awkward, but sacred. And for the first time in weeks, Madison allowed herself to breathe. Not because things were perfect, but because for the first time, she wasn't invisible. And neither was he. Madison didn't take the job right. Away. She walked out of that sleek Theranova office with her heart hammering and her head spinning. The man she once thought might disappear forever now stood steady, alive, and offering her a seat at his table. And yet nothing about it felt like a fairy tale. When she returned the next morning, dressed in her best thrift store blazer, she didn't know what to expect. But Nathan, Mr. Cole, as the staff called him, was calm, composed, and surprisingly kind. He introduced her with quiet confidence, never once mentioning the past or the note. And Madison? She kept her head down, determined to earn her place, not just carry a memory, but over time, something shifted. Every day at 3 p.m., Nathan would appear with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. No words, just a soft smile, remembering that she didn't drink caffeine. When it rained, he was always waiting at the door with an umbrella, holding it gently above her without a word. And one afternoon, when he saw her nervously flipping through business jargon, he left a pack of flashcards on her desk, labeled, "Today's Words, from your quiet supporter." They never talked about what had happened at the hotel, never mentioned room 204 or the bench soaked in rain. But it lingered, unspoken, like music playing just below hearing. And yet, it wasn't all easy. There were moments she doubted herself, when colleagues whispered behind glass walls, when she fumbled through a presentation and her face burned red with shame. But every time, Nathan was steady, never coddling, but always present. He'd glance at her after a long meeting and say just 3 words, "Thank you, brave one." At first, she thought it was just a callback to her note, a private little echo of something that once saved his life. But the way he said it, it felt real. It felt like he meant it every single time. And every time she heard it, Madison stood a little taller. One night, long after the office had emptied, they found themselves in the company's tiny employee library, helping reshelve a pile of books left in disarray. Nathan didn't delegate. He rolled up his sleeves, sorting biographies by spine color instead of author name, grinning like a guilty child when she corrected him. And that's when she saw it, the man behind the title. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, but someone who still knew what it felt like to be broken and to be held together by someone else's kindness. Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the same book. They didn't pull away. There was a silence, not awkward, but sacred. And for the first time in weeks, Madison allowed herself to breathe, not because things were perfect, but because for the first time, she wasn't invisible and neither was he. The deeper Madison fell into the rhythm of her new life, the more something inside her began to whisper, quietly at first, then louder. It wasn't doubt, not exactly. It was more like a question, one she didn't yet have the words for. She loved working alongside Nathan. Their days felt like pages from a book she never expected to be part of. But as she walked the polished halls of Theranova in her thrifted shoes and borrowed blouses, passing colleagues in designer suits and inherited privilege, she couldn't help but wonder, did she truly belong here? Or was she just the girl who, once, wrote a note that saved a man? That whisper grew louder the night of the company's annual networking gala. Madison had borrowed a navy dress from her neighbor and pinned her hair back with trembling hands. She tried to smile through the small talk, tried to nod along with acronyms she didn't understand. But near the dessert table, two sharply dressed executives stood chatting, voices just low enough to sting. "Nice of the CEO to bring his assistant," one said with a smirk. The other chuckled. "Well, when someone saves your life, I guess, that buys them a seat at the table." Madison froze. They didn't know she could hear them, or maybe they didn't care. She didn't confront them. She didn't say a word. She just turned and walked away, the laughter trailing behind her like a ghost. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. She breathed in deeply, trying to steady herself. Her heels clicked along the sidewalk as she wandered through the city, her heart thudding beneath her ribs. She wasn't angry. She was afraid that her worth in this world had become tied to someone else's pain and someone else's gratitude. Later that night, she returned to the event, not to stay, just long enough to leave a note. She slipped it onto Nathan's dinner plate before slipping out the door again, unseen. The note read, "You saved me from despair, but now I need to save myself from forgetting who I am." That Monday, Madison left a sealed envelope on Nathan's desk. It wasn't a resignation. It was a pause, a boundary, a quiet plea for space. Inside was a neatly typed letter. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for helping me begin. But I need to walk the next part of the road on my own." She left, her ID badge coiled on top like a ribbon. She didn't wait for a reaction. She didn't need permission. And that same evening, in her tiny kitchen, she opened her laptop and enrolled in night classes: business communication, digital literacy, nonprofit leadership. Her new apartment was small, one room, no elevator, no balcony, but the rent was hers to pay. The silence was hers to keep. There were no umbrellas waiting at the door, no tea at 3 p.m. Just her determination, and the sound of keys tapping toward a future she would build with her own hands. Because Madison didn't want to be rescued. She wanted to return, whole. 2 years passed. The girl who once slid a note under a hotel door was no longer just surviving. Madison had become a woman who moved through life with purpose. Her days were stitched together with early tutoring shifts, online classes, late-night study sessions, and quiet dinners eaten over textbooks. Every hour was earned. Every step was hers. She had built something, a non-profit focused on literacy and health education for underserved women. What started in a borrowed classroom with 2 students had become a statewide movement. Dozens of volunteers, hundreds of women, stories rewritten, names signed for the first time, prescriptions understood without fear. And now, standing in front of a packed auditorium, Madison Rivers wore a navy dress that once belonged to her mother. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a soft twist. No teleprompter, no script, just her voice, steady, full of grace, telling the story of why every woman deserves the tools to live freely, boldly, and with dignity. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Familiar faces smiled up at her. Former students, board members, even skeptical doctors who now called her Madam Director. But as the applause faded and she stepped off the stage, she felt a flicker of something missing, until she saw him. Nathan. Cole stood quietly in the back row away from the lights, dressed in soft grey, his hair now threaded with silver. He hadn't sent flowers. He hadn't reserved a front row seat. He had simply shown up. Their eyes met. The room disappeared. Later that evening, they walked together along the riverside, the same path where 2 years ago she had walked alone, questioning everything. The air was cool, The water shimmered with city lights. "I didn't expect to see you today," she said. "I never stopped following your work," he replied. His voice was steady, warm. "You never said a word." "I didn't need to," he said. "You were already saying everything through what you did." They stopped by an old wooden bench overlooking the river. Madison ran her fingers along the worn edges, then turned to him. "Do you still have it?" Without a word, Nathan pulled out his wallet, careful, slow, and unfolded a slip of paper, worn at the edges, but still intact. "If you're still alive today, you're braver than you think." Madison's breath caught. He held it like it was sacred. "All my life," he said, voice soft, "because it gave mine back to me." He didn't propose. She didn't ask. But when he reached for her hand and pressed a kiss to her forehead, it said everything words could not. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. Two lives, rebuilt apart, now walking forward, together. Not as rescuer and rescued, not as broken and healer, but as two whole people who once met in the storm and chose each other again in the calm. If this story moved you, if at any point you felt a lump in your throat, saw yourself in Madison's quiet courage or Nathan's silent battles, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Which part of the story stayed with you the longest? Was it the note under the door? The whispered kindness? The silent reunion by the river? Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that don't scream. They sit with you, linger, heal. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of them. So pause for a moment, reflect, then share a piece of your own journey, your favorite line, your quiet battle, or simply a message to someone out there who might need to read it. We read every comment, and more importantly, someone else scrolling through might read yours and feel less alone. And if you want to walk with us through more stories like this, stories that stir the soul and remind us what really matters, don't forget to subscribe. A new chapter begins tomorrow. Let's grow this space together. One story, one brave heart at a time.